Yo guys, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nate and I was Method's main tank for years before transitioning to an analyst role. I've been getting a lot of questions about tanks for the up and coming raid here in 11.2, so here are my thoughts and impressions with only a week out. As a general rule of thumb, unless you're playing at the very top level, any tank will be good enough to play. I always think it's important to think outside the box and make educated choices instead of just blindly following a meta someone's informed you about, so always take everything I say with a pinch of salt. Everything here is subject to change if there is any more tuning, and what is played in the Race to World First is unlikely to reflect my rankings here, as composition for us is far more important than a simple X tank is better than Y tank. If you're interested in watching me play any of these tanks, you can always catch me whenever I'm live over at twitch.tv/Imminate, and with that, let's get into it. I'll start with one of the tanks I think might struggle the most, being Guardian Druid. Now this by no means suggests that Guardian is bad, simply that I believe its design isn't perfect for the raid. It's putting out some very high single target numbers as Druid of the Claw, but you always have to take Druid of the Claw numbers with some skepticism, simply due to the fact it's one of the tank specs that lose the most from suboptimal play or playing less aggressive. Pair that with multiple bosses having heavy hitting dots and a lot of movement, which are Guardian's biggest weaknesses, it kinda makes me like Druid less and less. That being said, outside of the dots, you are a brick wall on Bear. The class has so many defensives to rotate between, so it can definitely make up for what's lacking. And you also bring Mark of the Wild. Obviously Mark isn't unique to Bear, but having a raid buff is better than not. Sorry DK. You do also provide 1 minute Raw, which has high value with the large boss rooms for raid movement. The caveat to Bear is that if you ever have to swap hero talent to play a Loon's Chosen, it's close to, if not the worst single target tank spec in the game in the new season. And at that point I feel it's just more valuable to play a different class if you're not the only raid buff provider. Next up is Vengeance. DH is insane at dealing with spiky damage intake, and they're extremely good against all forms of damage if they can maintain uptime. That being said, I don't think VDH is as strong as other options. It relies on one of 3 things to be true to be meta in raid. If they can break an encounter in a way another tank can't, if they are numerically overtuned, or if Havoc is awful. If none of those 3 things are true, you generally don't see this spec in the top end of raiding. Similarly to some other tanks on this list, Vengeance has no unique raid utility compared to Havoc, so its fate tends to be decided by tuning the majority of the time. And right now it is dealing some of the least single target tank damage. As for how they actually interact with the raid itself, there are no real downsides, so you can definitely have great success regardless. Then we have Warrior. Warrior is always an insane tank against blockable physical damage, but the problem arises when the damage profile of bosses isn't blockable, which some aren't in the new raid. It's been a common theme for a long time now that Warrior suffers from bleeds and sustained magic damage, since you don't really have the self-sustain to deal with these things. Blizzard have tried to counteract this with the Season 3 Colossus tier set and some buffs to talents like Fueled by Violence, but the funny part is Mountain Fane is actually better in the new season. This isn't an inherently bad thing defensively though, since Mountain Fane's rage economy is much better, and you don't press Revenge half as much, giving you more to dump into Ignore Pain, essentially trading sustain for mitigation. You also have an array of cooldowns to press to deal with larger magic hits, so there's no problem there either, even more so in Season 3 with some of the new talents like Hunker Down. To put this into the context of the new raid, you might struggle on a couple of bosses similar to Bear, but otherwise you'll be grand. And to top it off, Warrior is once again doing stupidly high damage. If all you care about is big number go burr, then you'll have fun just like in Season 2. There is however more to tanking than doing big DPS, or is there? The next 3 tanks on the list are all pretty amazing raid tanks regardless of the scenario, so it makes sense they'd kind of be in a league on their own. Each has their own strengths and weaknesses, but for the most part they are often the safest tanks to pick to go into a new tier without thinking too much about it. I'll talk about Brewmaster first since I have a bit of a soft spot for the spec. Stagger makes Monk simply a beast of a raid tank, and it's a large part of the reason why it's been the most played tank spec for World First raiding since Legion, being one of the 2 tanks for 10 out of the 16 end boss kills since. Pair Brewmaster's innate strength with the fact that Windwalker and Mistweaver devs were on vacation until this expansion, and it was just the obvious choice for a very long time. The things that made Brew so valuable outside of Mystic Touch are still present to this day. In fact, they are even stronger in Season 3 with the talent revamps it got. A defensive powerhouse paired with some particularly niche movement and utility, it makes this spec a pillar of stability in the raid tank world. Now combine that with the fact it's doing some very high single target DPS, and you're looking at an absolute powerhouse. That being said, like the others, it falls prey to the tuning of other monk specs, but unless you're in a top end guild, you don't have anything to fear by picking this tank for 11.2. Next up, I'll talk about Paladin. If there was a support tank spec, this would be it. The amount of potential and utility this tank brings, even disregarding their raid buff, is obscene. Immunities, 1 minute sack, off healing, although it's kind of dead outside of lay on hands, freedoms, the list goes on. This tank has the highest potential simply due to its overloaded kit, but even outside of that, it's just solid. It has the capacity to deal with any type of damage very well, with an arsenal of CDs in combination with Holy Shield, letting you block spells and bleeds. The only thing this tank sometimes struggles with is high melee damage, but you can make it work. Prop Palette is in the very unique position where it has so much value outside of simple numbers that you don't have to be afraid to bring it alongside Holy or Ret the majority of the time. The problems that prevent Prop from shining in a raid tier tend to be related to how useful their utility actually is rather than their raid buff specifically. With all of that said, paired with the above average damage Paladin is doing, it's a solid pick for the new tier. And lastly, we have everyone's favourite raid buff, Death Grip. Jokes aside, Blood DK is a staple in the raid tank world. You're essentially immortal with proper play, you have decent raid utility with AMZ, and most of all, you have grip. It's become a pretty big meme, so I'll try not to play into it, but I don't think people actually realise how powerful grip is. Sure, it's not an actual raid buff, and Blizzard have gone back and forth about the philosophy behind grip like 100 times, but it has essentially been mandatory for a plethora of bosses in the past, and I doubt that's going to change considering they're backpedaling on anti-grip encounter design. The main thing this spec actually struggles with is just downtime. If you have to disconnect from a boss for whatever reason, it can actually be quite punishing, especially with the lack of mobility, but like everything, there are ways around it to make it work. The damage from Blood DK is particularly high in Season 3 as well, so there is that too. If you have the luxury of not having to worry about raid buffs, I definitely recommend this spec. There's just something about having complete agency over your own survivability that ticks a very large box for me, and nothing about that is changing in the new season. So that wraps up my thoughts on the tanks for the new raid tier. Just to reiterate, I think all tanks are pretty well balanced right now, and if you're not playing at the very top level, play whatever your heart desires. Each tank has niches that they fit into and can perform very well for, so even though I've stated Warrior, for example, isn't great for the new raid, there might be circumstances or bosses where it's a beast for. If you've made it this far into the video, I hope you've enjoyed my little rundown, and good luck for the launch of patch 11.2. I'll be live every day during the Race to World First, and I'm hoping to continue to expand my content outside of Twitch. Huge thank you to all my Patreon supporters who help keep me alive. You can support the channel for as little as £1 per month. Check the description for links to Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and our Discord. And as always, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.